Hello, everyone. My name is Erin McCluskey, and I'm involved in the youth advisory group YAG for short. Our live stream event tonight, I'm so excited about because our guest is involved in wildlife conservation. So I want to introduce our guest tonight, John. Hello there, John.
Hello, how are you?
Could you tell us a wee bit about yourself, John?
Sure, my name's John Denerley. This is my sign name. Um, and I run a wildlife conservation reserve. So I look after animals, all kinds of different species. And that's actually been my childhood dream. I love animals. So to run a wildlife park, as I have done for the last 20 years in Dumfries and Galloway in Scotland, has been just terrific.
20 years. Wow, you must have so much experience. And I have got a list of questions. So I think the best thing for you is you to answer all of my wonderful questions I've ready for you tonight. So, John, I want to take you way, way back to the start of your journey and can you tell me how did your interest and passion in wildlife, where did it begin?
Oh, my parents used to take me over to Chester Zoo
Ah,
um, from
yeah.
when I was 18 months old in a pram. Um, and my parents said I used to try and get out of the pram to go and look at the animals. I was so excited by the giraffes and all, the elephants and all the different animals in the zoo. And I would be so stimulated. And so they bought me a book of
Uh-huh.
animals, and I tuned into TV programs about animals, and I guess that's been the start of the journey.
So I suppose that, as you say, that is the start, your parents taking there. But how did you get to where you are? I'm sure you had other jobs in between.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was at school, I'd ask my teachers, they'd say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I'd say, "I want to be a vet, or I want to work with animals." And the teachers would say, "Oh, you can't do that because you're deaf. You need to be smart to do that. You've got to go to university. You've got to study all these courses and things." And at that time, there was no access. There were no
Mhm.
interpreters, and um, so I started working in a bank.
A bank?
Yeah, worked in a bank for a while. And then I worked as a social worker for a little while, working with
Wow.
deaf people, supporting deaf people. My heart wasn't really entirely in it. It was still with the animals. So I
Uh-huh.
started volunteering at Chester Zoo. Um, and I was the first BSL guide doing guided
Wow.
tours around Chester Zoo. And really popular with deaf people. Lots of people came along. Um, and I guess it started from there, really. And eventually I found my way to the wildlife park and managed to realize my dream. I got there in the end. It's been a bit of a journey, but yeah, I work with animals.
That's fabulous. So, wildlife conservation, do you need any particular qualifications, or do you need that's really important to do that job?
You don't have to have qualifications. I mean, if you want to go on a course and learn, you can get qualifications, but you don't have to. I've got to where I am through experience, through volunteering, through work experience, through networking, getting to know other people in the field, um, knowing about, various animals and what they need.
Mhm.
And I started small with the Wildlife Centre just down in England, a little one before I moved to Scotland to a much bigger place. And as I say, I've been running that for 20 years. So I've got a lot of
Wow.
experience now. But I have to say, it is hard work. It's 24/7. It's not an easy thing. It's not all cuddling, furry creatures. There's a lot to read up on. You've got to know about their habits, how to protect them, what to do in various weather conditions, what they eat, what diseases they could have. So it's a lifestyle choice, really.
Well, you have got your own wildlife park and you've got loads of different animals, I'm sure. But what would be your favourite?
Oh, well, for over 20, 30 years, we've had different species, about 60 different species of birds and animals populating the wildlife park, and I've managed them all, and I love them all. But the one thing I always come back to is the red pandas.
The red panda? Do you have
Love
any?
them.
I think we've got a photo to show everyone of the red panda. Can we see the photo? Oh, that's not the red panda. That was
That
you and a
no, yes,
donkey.
that was me on my first donkey ride. Um, so I just went to a
What's that
show. I was
sign?
about 3. It
Oh,
was a
fair.
fair, it
Got
was
you.
a fairground thing, and my parents, were taking me round, and I got on the donkey. I mean, you can see from my face there, I'm a bit nervous. Wasn't sure about it, but yeah, that was one of my first connections with animals. And also, I used to have a dog.
I
Yeah,
was
so I
going to
think you've got
ask
a
you that.
photograph of that. Yeah.
But the red panda's definitely your favourite. So can we have the picture of the red panda, please? Let's hope. Okay, just bear with us for a second. Okay, might be having a wee technical glitch here, so we'll move on. I'm sure we'll get back to that.
But I was telling you about my dog, my Yorkshire Terrier.
Yeah.
I love that Yorkshire Terrier called Terry, um, because my parents thought I was a bit lonely and needed a bit of company. So they gave me a dog, and we were together for about 16 years. I had all
Oh,
kinds of different pets. I had rabbits, guinea pigs, whatever. But um, in a way, I had my own pet corner, like a mini zoo, really. My poor parents forking out for all of that all the time. But there you
your
go.
poor mum and dad, all that money. But I suppose they were just trying to encourage your passion.
Well, I am grateful to them for that. I really am, because they allowed all sorts of things. They were incredibly supportive. I'm really lucky I had a deaf family, so everybody was really supportive. And whatever I dreamt about, my parents said, yeah, you can do that. Just ignore all those people, all the haters who say you can't do it. You go for your dream. If that's your dream, you head for it, aim in that direction and just keep going. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was successful in the end.
What wonderful advice. So you must have lots of pictures of things. Can you tell? Well, before we show the picture, can you tell us a wee bit of this story? Oh no, we'll show the picture of the elephant. So this is a picture of John with an elephant. Right.
Ah,
Okay.
yeah.
I made a mistake there. Tell me about this elephant story.
Oh, well, I went around lots of zoos, and they do lots of exchanges, zoos, they do breeding programs and whatever. And I went to Blackpool Zoo there and met with the keeper, and was chatting with the keeper, and the keeper said, well, do you want to come and meet the elephants? I was like, are you kidding? So, zoos are always, as you know, kind of very enclosed. You're standing on the outside of the enclosure, but I was actually in there. The elephant was incredibly friendly, touching me with his trunk, and honestly, I had goosebumps. It was absolutely amazing. There were little baby cubs that that I could
Ah,
cuddle, and really very different. Just to be able to touch those animals and kind of connect with them was amazing.
oh, that's just so lovely to hear. Let me just check my list of questions. So let's just pause in your journey. You were in a bank, became a social worker, and then you got your wildlife reservation. But did you have a lot of support? Was there lots of people supporting you around that time financially?
Ah, well, the bank was just kind of like a work experience. It was pretty clear very soon that I wasn't interested in that. The social work thing was quite good because it was deaf people, but um, and there was access to interpreters. But really, I think my story is an illustration of the fact that you don't have to have one job for life. You can take different jobs until you find the thing that really fits you. Um, and access to work nowadays will cover interpreters for meetings and so on. And obviously, that helped me networking, going to workshops, meeting people at zoos, trying to improve the breeding program, education, guiding, encouraging people to come along to the wildlife park.
I'm sure a lot of people just find your experience just so rich and so interesting.
Well, I was the first deaf zoo or wildlife keeper in the UK. So obviously we've got a lot of deaf visitors from deaf clubs, deaf schools, deaf youth clubs, all flooding through the gates. So loads and loads of deaf people. Um, because deaf people are hungry for information in
Yeah.
sign language, you know. So, when you go on museum tours, hearing people get all these museum talks and whatever, but as deaf people, obviously we need that in BSL. So to get information about animals in BSL was great. The crown cranes and, would follow me. I had one that followed me absolutely everywhere because it was hand raised. So, I think it thought that I was its parent, identified with me. So it would just
Ah,
follow me everywhere. So all those experiences were golden. Yeah.
that's so sweet. I bet you have so many stories. So what I want to ask is, how did you start, like the process of doing the wildlife park?
Well, like I said before, I volunteered at Chester Zoo. That was the first step. Friends of the education group, I said, hello, I'm sure deaf people should have access to Chester Zoo. And they said, oh, what? So I eventually became the first BSL guide, talking about animal behavior, what the animals are called, where they're from, and so on. Um, and then eventually that led to the wildlife park, which was a really wonderful opportunity for deaf people, deaf visitors to come along, mix with hearing visitors, to have everything in sign language, and for deaf people, deaf visitors to have the advantage over hearing visitors was fantastic. Although hearing visitors, were equally enthralled by the facial expressions and the visual nature of sign language. And of course, it was lovely. Really really wonderful. I got a lot of support from the deaf community, a lot of people donating money to help feed the animals and so on. It was terrific.
I'm sure you must have been mobbed with deaf people.
Oh yeah, coachfuls, people coming from a long way because they wanted to connect with a deaf in nature reserve, a deaf wildlife conservation area.
And you're absolutely right. It's so important to get at the raw source of material, and that's so good. So, I've been thinking, can you tell me or describe a typical day for you at work in the Wildlife Conservation Reserve?
Sure. Well, feeding the animals is incredibly expensive. If you buy food
Oh,
from a shop, there's so many different things that you need, meat, vegetables, fruit, bread, um, bamboo shoots, all kinds of things. So we had to open to visitors to help raise the funds to cover the costs of the food for electricity, vets fees, food, and so on. Um, so luckily, some shops would donate their surplus food supplies to us. So that was a
wow.
great help to help us feed the animals. But every day, animals can't live without their food. So every day you're bound to that routine.
Well, I think we've got a photograph of what the food's like. Here we have John chopping up some food for the animals. That's a
And
great
and
photo. Oh,
and I have to say, what's important is that you have to make sure that all the animals have the diversity of diet that they need. They need a very careful dietary balance, each of them.
ah,
Um, so we'd get volunteer staff, we'd train them on the right feed for each animal. So it's a hard work. You have to get up very early in the morning. And by
how
the time you've done
early?
the feed round, oh, 6, 7 o'clock, you're doing the first feed round. So that 8 to 9, before you open for visitors, you're doing those rounds. And then you've got to do it again in the afternoon, take the meat round in the afternoon for the carnivores, the big cats, the lynx, and the wolves, and so on. So, obviously that's something that the visitors like to see, the meat being thrown to those animals. So it's interesting.
So, does all animals have different food then?
Oh,
Yeah.
very much so. I mean, you get the fruitarians, and the fruit has to be fresh. Like the lemurs, they eat only fresh fruit.
Okay.
Um, the wallabies, um,
Uh-huh.
they have a slightly different diet. The deer, like to have chopped vegetables, and that has to be fed in a bowl and so on. So and it's all weathers. In summer, it's great, it's lovely, great fresh air, a lot of exercise. But it's 27 acres, and
Wow.
of natural countryside. So there's tree canopy and everything to help kind of stimulate the wild environment. So yeah, it's a lot of ground
Just
to cover.
it sounds so beautiful, and it's obvious, John, that you have this rapport and contact with the animals. So, what else do you need to do if they get ill?
Well, as I say, we did 20 years of business, but coronavirus and the lockdown stopped people coming to our door. And we had to really do a quick step change because, what we found was during that kind of period of isolation, a lot of wilder animals like roe deer and so on were coming to our area because there was no traffic, there was no footfall. So those kind of native animals were really engaging with our environment. They felt very safe and comfortable in the forest. It was very therapeutic. I'm sure you have your own pets and cats and dogs, and when you stroke them, you feel like you bond with them. It's very therapeutic for you, and I felt the same with the wild animals.
When you think about it, your pets are there for you, and animals require you when they're out there on their own. So, but does the animals help with your well-being, do you think?
Well, coronavirus was a very difficult time, wasn't it? And we had at that time to change to a charity status. So we became the Galloway Wildlife Conservation Trust. And that
Ah,
helped us to raise funds in order to attract donations in order to support the animals and begin to do outreach and community education and establish a number of projects, like the Scottish Wildcats project. We're down to about less than 100 wildcats still in the wild in Scotland. So that's a project that's run from Edinburgh Zoo. The Highland Wildlife Park as well is involved in that. So we're associated with other zoos and other conservation parks. We have two Scottish wildcats at the moment, and they're breeding. So hopefully we'll be able to reintroduce them into the wild, into the Northern Highlands, in order to boost the local population. That's the ambition.
is it been successful or
Yeah, yeah, we're breeding quite well. The genes are good. We have to make sure you don't cross, any family genes or anything like that when you're breeding. So you have to make sure that the breeding is protected. You have to improve, their gene pool. Make sure that the numbers are good in terms of being able to sustain themselves in the wild and find food sources and so on.
I think what you're saying it's so important to work with other people and other organizations to get somewhere.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of work every day. Like you're saying, we do the feeding, that's routine, but you get new arrivals, new animals being born, get new
Oh,
animals coming in from other areas, that we've agreed to look after. So every day is different, and you just have to keep your mind open and take on whatever challenge comes.
do you get really excited if you get a new animal or maybe a wee
Oh,
baby animal?
I do, and I like advertising. We've got a new bird coming. Like we had a meerkat. Yeah, little
Ah,
meerkats. That's
meerkat.
right. We've got some new baby meerkats recently, and I think we've got a photograph of a baby otter, which is just they're so cute. So that's a new arrival. So visitors have been able to look for the new and really cute little animals.
There's the photo. There's the baby otter. That's
That's
so
it. That's
cute,
it.
John.
I know. Just a few weeks old there in that photograph. Tiny wee
Weeks.
thing. Oh yeah, absolutely beautiful. About 6 weeks
Oh,
old there. Um, and altogether we've had 7 new pups. One died, unfortunately. It was a little weak one. This is very common in wild animals that you have, a number of healthy births and one or two that are weak. So we check all of them, we gender all of them, we sex them. Um, just check that everything is all right, and then quickly hand them back to the mother, because obviously the mothers are very protective when they've just given birth, and you have to be very careful about not passing your smell onto the young, because
Can
the mother
that
might
affect them?
reject it then. They need to bond. Yeah, they need to bond. um,
Ah,
Baby animals need to learn from their parents, because they're role models. They need to learn those behaviors. Like I told you before about the king crane, following me around, thinking that that I was its parent because it was hand raised. So yeah, it's very important to encourage those attachments.
so I suppose the behaviour in an animal is really they're getting it from their parents, but if they're on their own, they can get confused. Is that right? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yeah, they can get very confused when they're babies. And it's like an imprint, like a kind of stamp. So you have to be really careful to make sure that that imprint is absolutely right. So any animal you touch, you have, the potential to change its behavior. So that's why a wildlife park, as natural as possible, as quiet as possible, is the happiest environment. And that's why we've been so successful with our breeding programs.
And I suppose it's the natural habitat for animals, that's not they're not suited to this sort of industrial environment we have now.
Absolutely. And wildlife park is a bit more natural than a zoo. I mean, when you come along to see the elephants and the giraffes in a zoo, it's not a natural environment that they're in. So a wildlife park tries to better replicate that.
You told us earlier on, John, about the red panda and how you love the red panda, but can you tell us how it came into your possession?
Yeah, red pandas come from China.
Okay.
So it was given to another zoo, actually, specifically for the purposes of breeding, for their breeding program. And that was successful. So I got two, a male and a female. Absolutely loved them from the beginning. Their faces, I mean, who couldn't love those? The colors, the red, the little ears, the little kind. They're from the raccoon family, so they have this kind of bushy tail as well, and they can climb trees. And they absolutely love bamboo. Yeah, they chew on bamboo stalks.
Wow.
Um, so like giant pandas, if you think about that, giant pandas, the big black and white ones always chewing on bamboo, and the little red ones are the same. So actually, I love them so much. I made them our logo, because yeah, yeah.
I think we have the photo of the red panda now. There we go. They're so
Exactly.
cute,
See what
John.
I mean? Those are little babies. So
So cute.
those were one of our first successes from the breeding program. It's very rare. They're really
Wow.
suffering a lot of decline in numbers now. Their habitat is being destroyed. Um, so the area in China that they come from is a very mountainous area. It's a very wooded area. So quite similar to Scotland in a way. And they breed well here, but they do have sharp claws to help them climb the tree trunks. But they are very sharp.
How fast do they grow?
But they grow quite quickly. Um, and then once they're fully grown, we give them away. So some have gone to Holland, some have gone to France, to zoos there, to encourage their breeding programs, because you want to prevent crossbreeding. So you want to make sure that the animals from the same family are not mating with each other. So we tend to kind of have this exchange system around Europe and around other areas. The same with elephants and so on, and rhinos and everything. Yeah, just to make sure that they're happy.
That is just so amazing. Loved sitting here watching all your stories. But I'm wondering, was it difficult to start the wildlife conservation park? Have you got any stories about this?
Well, the biggest challenge, I think, is communication. Obviously, we're in a rural area. It's different from, kind of high density population areas of England, where, people will come regularly. So the quality of life is lovely, but there's very little access to communication, very few interpreters around here. So gradually we've become accepted in the community. I think for now, the biggest challenge is the weather. Because through the summer we've had quite a lot of sun and visitors come. But then the last few years, there's been quite a lot of rainfall, hasn't there, through the summer months, and that affects visitor numbers. So we're trying to kind of, bit like other businesses, sort of change, diversify, and make sure our business is responsive to these climate challenges. I mean, I think it's the same with any hospitality industry, like hotels and so on, you know.
I wonder, John, if you had any challenges with any of your animals in the park?
I think the biggest challenges are transport, of course. You know, the animals.
Okay.
You know, we locked down in lockdown. We had to be there for the animals, so we can't chat. We can't travel. We have to be there for the breeding, to reintroduce animals into the wild. And we don't want to keep animals forever, you know, in perpetuity like they do in zoos. We want to reintroduce animals back into the wild. So you know, it's our responsibility to kind of breed these animals, get them back into the wild, get them back into their own natural environments. That's what we're aiming for.
Oh, fabulous, John. And as you said, communication is key. And you've learnt so many amazing things about wildlife. So, again, how did you do that?
Yeah. And what's been interesting is to see the animals themselves, like the lemurs, they communicate with each other. You know, and I think that
Wow.
deaf people, we work better with animals. It's something about the eye contact, it's something about the body
Hmm.
language, it's something about the facial expressions, it's something about reading bodies and knowing, you know, like very often you know, you'll know if someone's ill, and hearing people will say, well, how do you know that person was ill? And you think, well, I'm picking up cues in their body, their face, their, you know, their head. And I think that's the same with animals, you know. And we get these group tours, and deaf people will spot red pandas in the tree far more readily than hearing visitors will, who are kind of trying to rely on their ears. I think it's
Wow.
something about the eye contact with deaf people. It's a stronger bond.
Now, is that for all the animals, or is it just some that communicate?
Some animals, yeah. I mean, mammals, I think definitely, you know, I mean, I'm not talking about eye contact with snakes or anything like that, but with mammals, yeah, definitely. The lemurs, I think, because we're quite close relatives, any primates,
What
you
does
know,
that
obviously
mean,
we're
John?
really close. Primates, sorry, like monkeys and gorillas, orangutans, you know, lemurs are part of that family, and we're very closely related genetically as humans. So I think we
Wow.
communicate more readily.
It's been great listening to all your stories. And I wonder, since you've done so much, what have you got planned for the future?
Um, just to encourage more community involvement, encourage more volunteering, to help plant trees, look after nature, conserve the planet. I think we need to look at education for young people, for school children, and particularly for deaf young people. I welcome any deaf people who want to come on work placement, who are thinking about working with animals in the future. Come and have a taste of it. We can communicate, we can support you.
Fantastic.
We've had some deaf people do that before, you know, and it's been an
Wow.
interesting challenge for them. They've realized just how exhausting a day of working on with animals is. But
I'm absolutely sure it would be doing something like that, but I'm sure the skills and the transitional skills that you'd learn there would be just amazing.
yeah,
So it would be good if you could tell us what kind of volunteering you would offer people.
well, anybody really. We start you off kind of chopping the food, feeding, you know, cleaning out the mucky hay and the straw, you know, um, cleaning out the bedding, and then we keep records every day to make sure we know what's happened on each day. So the next volunteer coming in on the next day has a sort of diary to look back on.
Yeah.
So that's a good habit, you know. We get you chopping down trees, kind of doing the whole thing. There's a lot of things to do every day. Um, It's like the Forth Bridge, famous Forth Bridge, the
I
Forth
get
Rail
you.
Bridge. You start painting at one end, by the time you get to the other end, you've got to go back and start painting again. So it's this kind of never-ending cycle, and that's what it's like looking after animals. You finish one day, and the next day you've got to start all over again. But things grow and things change, and the environment changes. You go through the seasons, the changing colours. It's beautiful. It's fantastic.
And the volunteers, are they happy? They're not
Oh,
complaining?
very happy. It's a great experience. And they realize the challenges and the hard work involved. Um, but lots of people come from cities, from towns. They haven't really had a lot of rural experience, so they do really enjoy themselves. It's tiring. You can get a bit moody, a bit exhausted, but
Oh,
it's
I'm
good.
sure I'd be sleeping like there's no tomorrow if I was doing volunteering like that. But if there are any young people out there who are interested in animals, are interested in, wildlife park, have you got any tips for them?
I'd advise them, at school, it's worth choosing, particular topics, um, like animal care, zoology, if you can find it, environmental science. Choose those kinds of things. Focus on those kinds of courses. After school, go to college, do maybe a management course, learn some of those kind of skills, and get involved in volunteering. Ask around at zoos, ask around at wildlife parks, and the SPCCA, or other people who deal with animals. Study and experience, and the combination of those two things together, experience and theory, is so powerful. Start at the bottom. It's like any job. You start at the bottom and you climb up the ladder, and that will give you the experience. And yeah, you'll love it. If you're interested, just ask.
John, before we close tonight's Blethers, I just want to say that have you got any role models that
Oh,
influence you growing up?
my biggest role model growing up was a wildlife conservationist from television who always talked about animals. He traveled all over the world, and
Yep.
he's my role model, and here he is.
Let's have a look at the photo. Wow, David Attenborough, come
The
on, tell us
very
more.
same, the very same. Famous all over the world. Everybody loves his descriptions. He's been working for over 50 years in his field. It was my dream to meet him. And then I just went to a museum in London, and he was signing books there. There was a huge queue. It was about 2.5 hours to queue, but I was like, I am going to do this. And there were all sorts of people in the queue, old, young, and I actually got to meet him. I said, hello, I'm from Scotland. Here's my card. I showed him I explained who I was. I said I work with animals, and he said, "Oh, that's great, lovely to meet you." Shook my hand. We had our photograph taken. I couldn't have been more excited. He signed my book, and honestly, a couple of days later, he actually sent me a personal letter saying, "I'm
What?
really pleased to meet you. Good luck with your journey." And I have kept that in the folds, the leaves of the book, because it's so precious to me.
Is the
Absolutely
letter in
beautiful.
a frame?
Oh no, it's in the book. It's in the book. I'll frame it at some point, I'm sure, but I just keep it folded in the book there.
Oh, you must have felt amazing meeting your role model. How did
Oh
you feel?
yeah. Oh, I can't say. I can't say. I mean, I've been watching him for so many years on TV, and then to meet him, and he was such a nice man. He was so friendly, and I think that was the first time he'd met a deaf person. Um, I've been called the deaf David Attenborough, actually. So and yeah, I try and copy even his shirt. This is my
I
safari
agree.
shirt. Yeah,
Totally
yeah. I try
agree.
and copy his style. So I try and do what he's done for hearing audiences. I try and do for deaf audiences, and if I can be half of that, I'm a happy man.
Now, before we finish off tonight, is there anything else I want to give the final word to you, John?
No, I think the important thing for young people is, if you have a dream, plan for your future, work towards it, stick to it, keep going, keep going, don't give up, never give up. Any job, you can have any job you want, dream it, think it, go for it, and do the courses, do the work, do the volunteering in order to get there, like me.
That's awesome advice, John. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your time tonight. Thank you. And bye to everyone at home. Thanks for watching.
Bye.